In the hush of twilight's fading glow, the old year sighs, preparing to go. With whispers carried on the wind, a tale of memories, a journey thinned. The clock strikes 12, a solemn chime, as echoes linger of the old year's time. A fusion of moments, both joy and strife. They dance in shadows, the threads of life. The old year waltzes in a final embrace, leaving footprints in time, a fleeting trace. With every heartbeat, a farewell beat, a symphony of memories, bitter sweet. Yet, in silence, a promise gleams, a canvas blank where the future dreams. And the new year dawns, a radiant birth, a tapestry of hope spun upon the earth. Colors blend as the old year sighs, fusing into the new with quiet goodbyes. A metamorphosis in the cosmic expanse. As one chapter closes, another to enhance. The hands of time, forever in motion, an eternal dance, a cosmic devotion. As seconds pass, a continuum spun, the old and new in an endless run. So, let us toast to the year that parts, to memories cherished, to hopeful hearts, as the old year whispers its last adieu. Embrace the new, as dreams renew. Wow, that was kind of pretty good. My
Kind
view.
of, sort of good. Yeah, kind of.
So, giving literary criticism to artificial intelligence is could be a new thing for me.
Yeah, but you can tell somehow you can tell that it's not a person. I don't
You
I don't know what that is.
you could definitely tell it's not a person. But
Uh-huh.
speaking of a person, who is this guy actually talking? Before I jump into that
Yeah, who
disembodied
who
voice.
are you?
Yeah. So for those of you who's actually been paying attention, and if you're watching this, I would imagine you are. This is episode 200. Astounding. We skipped last week, so otherwise,
Yeehaw.
yeah. But this is a SG2 on space, the only weekly space show, or almost weekly space show. That doesn't sound quite as right, so we just stick with the only weekly space show. Now, what is it? Well, as the name suggests, we talk about space, and every single week we can help it. And who is we exactly? Me, the Shen, and then this guy, who I don't know why you're still named just me. Maybe that should change. Let me know what you want to change it to. This is the guy named Leonard Kramer, uh, who is currently muted and
There we
say
go.
try saying, yeah, there you go. You
Something.
were no, I couldn't lip read, so I don't know what you said.
Oh, I didn't say anything. I just said that's Shen. How you doing?
My throat's a little sore, so I'm gonna leave you to do most of the
Oh,
talking. Otherwise,
uh,
this topic of fusion, I think it's really a good one for the end of this year. The I was just thinking in the poem there, I wanted, even though ChatGPT wrote it, one thing I put in there is that tell me how the old year kind of fuses into the new one. So I kind of want to
oh, I see. Fuses. Okay.
yeah, exactly. That's why there was that word fusion in there. Of course, it doesn't have anything to do with the physics concept.
Yeah. I was thinking that we could talk about nuclear fusion.
Of course.
Just
So, before I continue, let me give a hearty thanks to supporting the show. You guys are still doing it, regardless of whether or not you're actively watching it every week. But thank you, Kyle Baker, Sam Welsh, and John Graves, for your monthly donations. Also, I'm going to leave this ticker running at the bottom about how you can actually, no, not that one, this one, supporters and patrons. Always adding Atum Ra at the end because frankly, he helped the show a lot before we decided to do this on our own. So thank you all. All right. With all that said, let's. Oh yeah, and if you want to support the show yourself, you can go on patreon.com/sg2 on space. All right. With all that said, Leonard, talking about fusion, I automatically just think about the sun and the stars and all that. So
yeah.
what is a has fusion has it been around forever since the start of
It
the universe?
Why, yes, it has, Shen. It's the energy source that powers the universe. So yes, since well, um, there was fusion going on prior to the Big Bang, but you know the I mean not prior to the Big Bang, but immediately subsequent to that. So because we do have some 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 fusion products, but primarily the most of the products that all of the atomic nuclei, the things that we're made out of, are the result of nuclear fusion. So fusion, what we're talking about is a reaction of atomic nuclei, um, and where there's a property of matter that the binding energy that holds the nuclei together is much stronger than the electrostatic force. So all of the ions and
But
all of the nuclei are positively charged. They have electrical charges that are very difficult to overcome. But if you do get two nuclei very, very close together, especially certain kinds of nuclei very, very close together, then the strong nuclear force takes over and releases a tremendous amount of energy. And to give you an idea about the difference in energy for chemistry, for regular chemistry reactions, where for example, if you have a campfire or a fireplace fire, the energy that's being produced, that's being generated there, is from regular chemistry, like the oxidation of the
mhm.
wood. It burns, and that's giving off energy per molecule of a few tens of electron volts, which is one of the units of energy. By
I like
contrast, the energy that holds a nucleus together is tens of millions of electron volts, and so that's why
but it's not a chemical reaction, right? So
not a chemical reaction by any means. And so this the whole point is, the whole key is to get, there's three things that has to happen. The temperature has to be high enough, the density has to be a certain high value, and then the amount of time that the nuclei are held close together, are confined together, has to be above a certain threshold. And there's all kinds of quantum mechanical kinds of phenomenon, including a phenomenon called tunneling, that's involved in producing fusion. But the main thing is confinement. It's confining the
I found this really awful picture here, but is that
yeah.
what you were saying?
Is that what I was saying? Yeah, three
Yeah,
things that we need.
yeah.
Yeah, so you need, and this is for artificial fusion, which is kind of, I guess we can talk about both of these things. Now this is in contrast to nuclear fission. Okay, so nuclear fission is when an atom is broken apart and releases energy. And in the periodic table of elements, the lighter elements have a lot of potential energy when they fuse. So hydrogen and the isotopes of hydrogen, like deuterium and tritium, helium, and a number of the other lighter, even boron and some of the other lighter
Oh, yeah.
elements,
Okay.
they have a lot of potential when they fuse. And so now and that continues up to the element iron 56, the isotope of iron, that's called has a mass of 56. So iron 56 is the lowest potential. So you can't fuse anything with iron, because the nuclear forces that are holding the iron together are just about equal to the electrostatic repulsion. So you don't get anything back. In other words, you'd have to if you were to fuse try to fuse two iron atoms together, the electrostatic repulsion wouldn't buy you any. It is too great. It wouldn't buy you anything.
Let's see this.
But
This little picture maybe shows it. So
that's
iron
yeah,
peak,
that's
right?
it. Right. Yeah.
Combining energy. So
That's exactly what I was trying to explain. And so hydrogen and actually it doesn't show hydrogen, and on that line down there in the lower left, there's also deuterium and tritium.
huh.
They're in there, and they will fuse to.
Can you explain for our lay audience out there what binding energy means?
Binding energy is the energy that's holding the nucleus together.
Okay.
So that's the strong force that's holding that's related to the strong force. And so you can see so when you have an atomic nucleus that's heavier than iron, then you have the potential for it to undergo fission. And there has to be a certain kind of isotope. In other words, it needs a certain number of usually it needs an excess of neutrons in order to make the nucleus unstable in a certain respect. So uranium is out there, and uranium has an atomic number of 92, which means it has 92 protons, but it has a whole bunch more neutrons. And so there's several isotopes of uranium. Now we're not talking about fusion anymore, but it's okay. Fission. So uranium has these two isotopes. One of them is uranium-238, and the other one is uranium-235. The 238 has some extra neutrons, and in its case, it has more neutrons. And in that case, those neutrons tend to stabilize the nucleus and make it harder for it to undergo fission. Whereas the uranium-235 is more or less unstable, and it's vulnerable to neutrons. So if it gets struck by a neutron, then it will split, give off a lot of energy, and then liberate more neutrons.
Now, what we're talking about here, though, is the opposite. We're talking about fusion.
So yeah, it's very important to. I mean, it's very interesting, I think, for our audience to know that fusion is on the other side of this process, where we are fusing or these very light elements that were created at the origin of the universe, hydrogen and helium. Primarily hydrogen undergoes fusion, and this is what powers all of the stars. And the confinement mechanism, remember I said you have to overcome the electrostatic repulsion of the ions. So gravity serves that purpose. And we've talked about how stars work in the past. So deep inside of the sun and all stars, there's a thermonuclear reaction going on, and actually we know that because one of the byproducts of the nuclear reaction, even though we can't observe it directly, are neutrinos.
Yep, we definitely have talked a lot about neutrinos before.
So that's nuclear fusion, and it's been going on for 13 billion years, and creating all of the substances that we're made of through ultimately running out of star running out of fuel and then exploding and creating supernova and scattering all this material throughout the universe.
This depiction here is showing, I think, a star's evolution in terms of the hydrogen is going to fuse in helium fuse into carbon, right?
So that's a topic maybe for another day, but that is kind of related to the stellar evolution, where a star will burn up all of its hydrogen, which are the easiest things, the easiest elements to fuse, and they will produce helium, and then when it runs out of that fuel, then it will collapse some more. So the compression from gravity, self compression from gravity, will put it into a helium fusing or helium burning regime, carbon burning, and so on, all the way down until it gets to an iron core, and the iron will fuse
We're not
anymore. Now,
fusing anymore.
if there is enough gravity, then that will collapse. That could collapse into a neutron star,
Yep.
or
And
ultimately a black hole. So
watch our other episodes in regards to talks about
yeah.
that. But going
So-
back into our main topic of just fusion in general, Leonard, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so one of the aspirations of humankind, since this has been discovered in really the first half of the 20th century, since this effect was discovered, was to be able to harness the nuclear fusion as a power source. The hydrogen bomb, which is a thermonuclear bomb, was developed in the 1940s, and I think the first one was detonated in 1951 or 53. I don't remember exactly, but it was sort of directed by one of the scientists named Edward Teller, so on and so forth. So that's
I was at some Pacific Marshall Islands.
Absolutely. So Bikini Atoll, and we know there was a hydrogen bomb because SpongeBob lives. No, I'm just kidding.
Named Ivy Mike was detonated on the island of Eniwetok Atoll.
Eniwetok.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's say it
Sorry.
better. November 1st, 1952.
Okay, 52.
10.4 million tons of TNT.
Right. So it's pretty trivial. I mean, we do know how to do this. The hydrogen bomb was set off by using a nuclear device to detonate.
Yeah.
So we use nuclear fission to sort of set it off, as it were. But what it's sort of a dream of mankind since the early 50s, to harness this in a controlled environment, in a controlled manner, so that we could burn the hydrogen. The really good thing about that is that the hydrogen is the fuel for it is reasonably abundant. I mean, certainly the best reaction or the easiest reaction to accomplish this is a reaction between deuterium, which is an isotope of hydrogen that has an extra neutron attached to it, and tritium, which is a hydrogen that has 2 neutrons. So the deuterium and tritium, that reaction yields something like 13 mega electron volts compared to just 10 electron volts for chemical reactions. So
this is a picture from a company called Helion Energy.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of startups now that are getting into this. We've been working on this thing I was going to get into kind of a little bit of the history having to do with, there's various schemes that have been thought up for confining the hydrogen. And so the most popular approach was something using magnetic fields to ionize the gas, and then you will confine, because you need to be 150 million degrees. And I didn't just make up that number. That's the number. You need it to be
something. How many degrees?
150 million Kelvin.
Wow.
So yeah,
okay, that's really hot.
That's the activation. That's to activate this, so that, and then you also have to have a sufficient density, and you need to confine it for a sufficient amount of time. And the approach to this, there is no substance on Earth. There's no way to confine this with ponderable media that to do this. So the idea is to confine it using magnetic fields, because you ionize it, it becomes electrically conducting, and then that's one of the things you can do. This was invented in Soviet Union, by the way. This primary method called the tokamak. Yeah, where they would and about 1958, I think, is when they came out with that. And there's been a lot of excitement about this. This has been historic. It's been going on for that long. The thing about the tokamak is that they try to drive currents. They use electrical currents that they drive in the plasma. So this is a torus, right? And obviously that guy can't be there when it's on, but this is
I would hope not.
they have the gas in there and they compress it with the magnetic field, and then they heat it with electric currents that are flowing through.
Mm-hmm.
And that ends up having a problem because the plasma tends to be kind of unstable when you try to drive currents through a plasma. It kind of like what it wants to do is it wants to sort of how do I explain it? Like it likes to bunch up and wiggle around and do all kinds of unstable things. And so
I see.
people have been working on this for years and years and years. In the late 70s, early 80s, there was another approach that used they came up with this thing called a stellarator, and so they had to try to engineer the shape of the torus so that they could compensate for the potential instabilities. One of the problems, it was kind of invented or thought of in the 1960s.
It looks really strange.
And so so the purpose of this is to try to mitigate the instability in unstable modes, and they won't drive any currents. What they do is they just heat it, by compressing it, and I think they use microwaves to heat the plasma. But this complex design required better computers and software to study how the plasma. And that's actually, I think that's some of the most productive work that could go into this area.
HSX stellarator.
So that's a stellarator. So now in the news last year, I don't know, there's another approach called inertial confinement.
Yes.
And this has to do with lasers and
magnetic confinement is one of two major branches of control fusion research, along with inertial confinement fusion. All right, continue.
Yeah, and so they've been promising us this for years, and there actually was a joke that went around for a while saying, you know what, nuclear fusion. And I remember this when I was a child. I was talking about nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion is the future, is the energy source of the future. It's 30 years away, and always will be 30 years away.
I've heard of that too. Actually.
So, but
we have made breakthroughs recently.
There has been a very significant breakthrough, and I'm thinking, I'm thinking that it is a very important breakthrough. And so,
what are these giant tubes here?
Is that Lawrence Livermore? Is that the?
This is a LL. Yeah, it is. I think.
Yeah. So there's lasers. So Lawrence Livermore. So the idea is, let me talk about what the approach is first of all.
Right.
So you can try to confine the plasma through magnetic fields, or you can take advantage of the inertia of in other words, heat it and confine it, and then heat it so quickly that it doesn't have time to explode. So that you can, and so so you use the inertia of the fuel itself in order to keep it confined long enough to fuse. And so that's the approach that they've taken at Lawrence Livermore. And a year ago, back in December.
And I recall us talking about that at one of our episodes.
Yeah. And so there's this quantity called Q, which is the efficiency. So how much energy goes in, and then it's a fuel. And so if it burns, then you'll get some energy coming out. And so the hope is that you'll be able to engineer this in such a way that you can get the fuel to burn, and the amount of energy that you need in order to light it, basically to ignite it, is overcome by the amount of energy coming out. So you can burn a stick. If you have a wet newspaper, you can kind of burn it if you keep the flame burning all the time, and it'll burn. But if you have dry paper, you can burn it, and then you'll get more flame. Well, that's what they were trying to do. And so Q is the measure of that, measure of amount of energy going in, the amount of energy coming out divided by the amount of energy that went in. And so for years they've been able to approach 20%, 0.2, 0.5, but last year around this time of year in December, this group at the National Ignition Experiment,
National Ignition Facility in December
Ignition
2023.
facility at Lawrence Livermore, which is like a nuclear weapons. It's a
Q equals 1.54.
Right, and so it wasn't just like 1.01. It was they got 50% more energy out of it than they put in, and so that's a phenomenally successful result. And my understanding is I'm not clear on the reports. I've been trying to get some more information about it. They have repeated it at least twice more, and maybe a third time, and each time they've been playing around with the design.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, they've been playing around with the design of the target, especially, and so they've been getting more. They've been getting more energy coming out of this, and so I mean, this is a big deal. Now, I have a caveat I have to put in, is that even though the nuclear part of the problem has been demonstrated, in other words, the energy coming out, there's about 100 times as much energy it takes to generate and they're using lasers. Okay, so they have I think it's 192 lasers. I don't know why I remember that. 192 lasers that are used to all come together onto a specially designed target, and the target involves some kind of carbon capsule, and the fuel is frozen. I mean, it's actually a frozen pellet of deuterium and tritium, and they got enough energy out of it, to, I guess, boil some water, maybe.
Yeah, that's about the same amount as to boil water. But in order to even get that condition, this Q did not factor into the fact that they needed to power on all these lasers. Right?
Yeah, so they do need to power, and they're not, so there's a lot of inefficiencies, but the physics is settled. Okay, we don't. There's nothing to stop us now, and other than engineering. Okay, it's an engineering problem, right? So that's what I wanted to talk about.
It's a pretty daunting engineering problem, right?
Yeah. So you have to think about a lot of stuff. It's like, well, it's like, okay, so I have to do all this work, to make this little pellet, and I can only do it 3 times a year, So in order to make a power plant, they'd need to be somehow figuring out a way to do this thousands of times per minute, in order to have, instead of just once every, or 3 times a year, 3 or 4 times a year. So like, these are the kind of issues that have to be overcome. The other thing I wanted to point out is, although deuterium is pretty common, I think it's like it's in seawater. It's one of the kinds of hydrogen that exists. Most hydrogen in the universe is a single proton with an electron, and I think about 1 in 1,000 hydrogen atoms is a deuterium, and we would have to develop some plants for extracting that from water. Probably is how we would do that, and that's something that we kind of know how to do. And because there's so much energy from it, it's only a few kilograms. A fusion reactor might need 100 kilograms of deuterium for a whole year, right? And then the other thing is tritium. Okay, tritium is not so easily come by. It actually has to be synthesized. We have to make it from.
You're gonna have to make it in order to use it to
Yeah,
fuse?
we'd have to use the neutrons from the nuclear reaction, from the deuterium-tritium reaction, in order to uh, react with some other metal like lithium.
For
And
people who are confused, this is what
yeah,
I'm talking about.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
So
protium is what we normally have, right?
yeah, I usually don't say protium. I just say hydrogen, but protium's kind of a cool name. It's a cool
Yeah.
thing. But protium just means it's a proton, and then deuterium means it's it's
These
it's
are
a
different isotopes, which means they have different number of neutrons.
yeah.
So, yep.
So it happens that deuterium and tritium are the ones that are most favorable energetically. They're the ones that are easiest. They will fuse at the lowest energy, and also they give a tremendous amount of energy out. The sun, runs primarily by the reaction having to do with fusing hydrogen together, but
Right.
it doesn't have the same issues that.
How come you're saying the sun doesn't have the same issues that we have here on Earth trying to
Yeah,
do this?
because it's confining it by gravity, and so it can just get as hot as it needs to in order for it to happen, in order
Okay,
to
I see.
facilitate
Yeah,
the
it can't
reaction.
really depend on gravity to do that.
And then the thing is, the single proton type of hydrogen is 1,000 times more abundant than deuterium, and there's scarcely any tritium around. So we would have to synthesize the tritium from some other metal, something else, like from lithium. I think that's lithium or boron or some
Right.
other, right. So that will be a problem. But the
Deuterium tritium
yeah.
fuel. That is
Hmm.
deuterium is common about 1 out of every 6,500 hydrogen atoms in seawater.
Okay. I knew it was something like that. Okay, I said 1,000. So
Tritium, pretty close.
uh
Tritium's not common. Okay, I see.
and
So go ahead.
yeah, and so I think just about
Hmm.
so here it is. 1 gram of deuterium tritium is equivalent to 2,400 gallons of oil, right? And so a few hundred kilograms of this material could power a power plant, for the whole year, right?
That's
So
remarkable.
yeah, so
So right
anyway,
now you're saying we have all the theoretical knowledge. It's the engineering
we
part.
we yeah we've checked the box now that we can do this, right? And so these other approaches having to do with using the tokamak or the stellarator, they have yet to demonstrate that, but they're under a lot of pressure now, and I think there's a lot of funding going in it, and there's like a half a dozen to a dozen startups that are going into, I mean, companies
Right.
that are getting into this now, trying to figure out ways to do
By the
this.
way, sometime in the near future, thank you for reminding me about startups. I just saw my friend Iman. I'm gonna have to interview him at some point because he works for a nuclear fusion startup
Oh,
out
that would be cool. Okay.
out near Seattle. I need to talk to him actually at some point.
Oh,
But look at all
S-
this. There's a whole bunch
yeah.
of companies.
So all of these companies, and they have different. One of the companies in England, I can't remember what I think they're called, First Light or something. They're making an actual gun. I mean, not they're using it's like they're using the inertial confinement method, but instead of using lasers, they're actually using an impactor, and they've built a big gun called
Let's
the
try this out.
BFG, big
Are you gonna say it? I did not say it. Is it?
gun,
Yeah,
and
that's from isn't that from a game? Video game?
I don't know.
Okay, but
I'm
anyways.
not really much of a gamer anymore. I kind of outgrew it.
Okay, but
Um,
point is, this is a company you're talking about, First Light, right?
yeah. So, and that's in England, and so they have a gun, and it has they're using like
Oh, here it is.
gunpowder,
BFG.
and they fire it, and
But
then
hey! Here's the
oh,
acronym. It's family friendly. See,
it's the big
friendly gun.
friendly gun. Okay.
Yeah. See, you don't, the
So,
thing
but the
is
idea
real.
is the idea is that they can actually use a tungsten or some kind of heavy bullet that will impact the deuterium tritium and then get some energy out of it. I have some confidence in them. I think that they've
That's
been working.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the approach they're taking. And I think we're going to see it because the Lawrence Livermore people have thrown the gauntlet down, and so I think in the next year or so we're gonna yeah, that's it. They're gonna have some news about other approaches. The nice thing about the inertial confinement method is that you don't the density of the material. You don't have to deal with the plasma. In other words, the plasma is sort of tenuous and has lower density, but the solid, the frozen gas maintains the high density. Of course, the issue is, like you gotta. I'm trying to figure out how they're gonna how are they gonna do this like on a continuous basis. I guess maybe they could have like a strip.
What do you mean by continuous basis?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking of, I don't know anything about, the engineering details about this, but I imagine that in order to have a power reactor, because that's the goal, in order to have a power reactor, you have to be exploding these little pellets, and they're only 2 millimeters in diameter. You have to be doing this over and over and over again, like thousands of times per minute, in order to have something that is continuously producing energy. And then you have to absorb the energy. You have to channel it into, some kind of, heat exchanger to power turbines and generate electricity. So this
is the one that my friend works for, Zap Energy, based out near Seattle.
Oh, okay.
So I've never been to this website, but oh wow. So let me see what they do. Hey, that's kind of cool. You just scroll and it does this. We saw the fun of it. Using
so it looks
drives current through the flow. Driving current creates a magnetic field, confining, compressing the plasma. Higher the current, greater pressure, temperature, and density of plasma.
So that appears to be a kind of inertial confinement or a hybrid sort of approach, using both inertial and
modular reactors can deliver power to small communities.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of
that's pretty cool. Let me see how
this is the energy of the future. I think it's gonna happen.
Oh, this is a Z pinch method, which we did not talk about, but that's another.
I read about the Z pinch. I think I don't really understand exactly what they're doing there.
I'm gonna have to interview my friend, and I'm sure he can explain everything.
Okay.
At some point in the future. Okay, then. Yeah, they recently got a bunch of more government and venture capital funding.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, the Lawrence Livermore, yeah.
There's definitely a lot of stuff out there. That's for sure. A lot of so it's no longer the realm of, well, I mean, obviously governments are spending millions, if not billions on it still. But.
So one of my gripes about, there is a facility that they've been talking about for decades called ITER, and it's a tokamak facility. It's supposed to be huge, and they've been building it for 30 years, as far as they spent the first 20 years fighting over where they were going to build this. It was a consortium of different governments. So ITER.
Yep, that's it.
And so they spent years just fighting over where they were going to site it. And then finally they said, okay, the French are let's put it in France, okay, and calm them down. And then they had cost overruns, and they had mistakes and all kinds of stuff. And then they don't even promise that it's a reactor, really. The power reactor. They just say it's an experiment, and it really, I can't quite put my finger on what it is that bothers me so much about this humongous project that goes on and on and on. And
It's
and it's
probably
only it's
yeah.
only an experiment, and it's like, well, so every experiment you're going to spend 30 years trying to build another reactor, and then so I don't know. I think this is my if I had to bet money on this, I would bet more likely than not that it will never even work. Okay,
Okay.
I just think that and the bad thing about it is that they have sort of absorbed all of the talent. You know, everybody who wanted to get into doing fusion research had to work on this project because this is where the
30
money
years
was going
ago.
into.
Right. So I think it's
I,
like a bunch of countries agree to it.
yeah,
Like
but in the meantime,
most countries in the world agree to it.
yeah, in the meantime, Lawrence Livermore, you know, they they uh they
Yeah.
uh
I
they,
think
like I said, threw the gauntlet down, said, okay, this is, we did it. Here, what are you guys doing with spending 30 years building this thing?
are they
I
finished building this?
No.
They're still building it.
And they said, they
Oh,
don't
currently under
expect,
construction.
yeah, they don't expect to be done for another 5 years, and then they don't even expect to be doing the experiments and for another 5 years after that. And so I don't, so what are they doing? I mean, if it's just an experiment, how can you have this much effort going into just an experiment? You see my
Well,
problem?
I see your problem. I mean, I guess they're treating it like a fundamental research,
Mm,
which requires decades and
per,
billions of dollars.
perhaps, or maybe they just see it as, oh, we can get a lot of money from this will never work, but we can just tell people that it will, and we can get a lot of money out of it, and then we can retire, and nobody will be the wiser. But there have been things like there were like really egregious mistakes made, having to do with some kind of cooling tubes, and millions of dollars of work that had to be reworked, and then
I mean, just building a
so
gigantic complex to support this gigantic machine, which is not
yeah.
guaranteed to work. I mean, it's not guaranteed to,
I I
come
don't
up with.
I don't understand. I don't understand that it's too ponderous for me. I might, maybe I'm just off base on this, but it doesn't seem like an efficient use, I guess, is the thing. It doesn't seem like an efficient use of resources to be spending all of this time, money, and most important, absorbing the talent. Like all the physicists that are working on this.
How are the physicists working on this when it's not even operational?
I don't know. I guess they're running computer codes trying to figure out, what kind of experiments they're going to do. But
They're trying to figure out what experiments they're gonna do once
yeah,
it actually is available. Yeah, okay.
yeah. So I have seen interviews with some people who have
Uh,
expressed this frustration or this despair over
right.
the
35
amount of time.
countries, 35 years. So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, we'll see what happens. It'd be funny if one of these little startups with a few
Yeah,
$1 billion end up being the first.
that's right.
That'd be pretty ironic.
And furthermore, if this is what it takes to build a reactor, well, we can't. That all. If this is like an example, or typifies the effort that has to go into building a fusion reactor, then it's not feasible. I mean, we're going to have hundreds of reactors that are going to take 30 years to build, and
Well, it probably wouldn't take 30 years, but still, it's a lot of money. And
so yeah, it just, there's just something not
yeah.
right about it. So I guess the final thing about fusion is that the amount, we would not expect it to have the same safety concerns as as fission
Fission
because
reactors. There's no meltdowns or anything.
you can't, because the reason is that there's a limited amount of fuel that's present at any given time, and it's so hard to keep it confined and at the high temperatures and so forth that if anything goes wrong, it just stops. It just if
Okay.
anything goes wrong with it, it just fizzles out.
It just
I
fizzles out.
think.
Well, I mean, I have heard that it's a lot safer than fission. So,
and then the radioactive, there is some radioactive materials that might be generated by the neutrons coming off. So we might expect to have some radioactive, but not anywhere near the same degree as the nuclear reactors that we're using today.
yeah.
So,
And
anyway.
with all that said, Leonard, thanks for that expose of what is out there as well, and your views on it. I do agree with you.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Okay. Nobody can stop you from speaking. So this is something which I'll be interested in hearing from our listeners from 10,000 years in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure that they've got nuclear fusion all worked out. Actually, they're probably using, antimatter annihilation. So
fusion is like probably so primitive to them.
Yeah.
Why are you even talking about fusion? It's something that we did 9,000 years ago.
Yep.
Or more actually.
I do hope that they find us amusing.
It'd be very amusing where something we think is advanced is so primitive in their standards.
Correct. Right.
Yes. All right. Well, please forgive us. We don't know any better. Yeah. So we're just going to talk about what we know.
That's right. Anyway, we're going. I guess
way over time again.
We went over time. You just let me keep talking then.
Well, it's fine. This was an interesting topic, and you did remind me that I actually do have personal connections.
That would be cool. Yeah, I'd like to see that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. With all that said, I'm gonna skip my normal weird part, since we already talked a lot. So we're going to be. This has been SG2 on Space, the only weekly space show. You can find us on youtube.com/shengood/streams, or you can look up SG2 on Space. A lot of past episodes you could find on some other channels on YouTube under Action One Media, which, like I already mentioned, Atum Ra was part of that.
Lord Ra.
Yep, he's Lord Ra. And also on, if you want to go back to the time before Leonard, there were times there. You could find also a bunch of episodes on Facebook. Unfortunately, I do not update those anymore because I still don't have access to that page after I got hacked. So
oh yeah, that was really
bad.
Bad scene.
But if you do want to look at it, for any viewers out there, you can go to facebook.com/The Shen Show. But for anything new, go on YouTube, look up at shengo/streams. Once again, you can go to patreon.com/SG2 on Space to to support. And thank you for once again Kyle Baker, Sam Welsh, and John Grace for your kindly donations. And with all that said, look up because you never know what you will see.
Good night. Namaste.
Namaste.
Shalom.
Oh yeah. And I was also going to say, if you're watching this live, this is the last episode of 2023.
Yeah, amazing.
We made it another year.
You can't believe it. I can't believe I made it to the 21st century.
21st century was 24 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. All right. Let's. I guess sometimes it takes a little while to realize that, but
yeah, we're almost a quarter of the way through the 21st century.
That is remarkable. That's like blink of an eye ago. Wow.
George Jetson is 2 years old.
That's remarkable.
Wherever he is. Yeah.
All right.
You don't even know what that means. All right. Good night.
Jetson from the Jetsons, of course.
From the Jetsons, yeah.
Yeah. But are you saying what year were they supposed to depict?
Oh, I don't know the exact year, but it said that he was born in 2022.
2020. Oh my gosh. His birthday is July 31st as well. That's the same as mine.
Or something. I don't know.
Interesting. I mean, I just looked at it.
Yeah.
Okay. So George Jetson will be close to 2 years old now. So
yeah.
For anybody who cares. All right.
Whatever that means is so weird.
That is so weird. All right.
Good night. Again.